Hello everybody, Justin Danger Carroll here. You may be wondering why you're listening to this instead of reading it. So I am attempting to expand the reach of this blog a little bit. YouTube is a fairly significant time investment making videos. So I've decided to just try to convert a lot of my articles to basically just audio. There will be some poor quality B-roll on YouTube if you want to watch it. And sometimes these might be actual videos. But I'm going to start doing a bunch of these as audio. You can watch if you want, but it's primarily made to listen to. I listen to a lot more YouTube videos than I actually watch. So this is the first one in this series. If you like this, let me know. If not, well, I guess you can also let me know, but I don't need an angry email. Today we're talking irons versus optics. Why pistol optics is the clear winner. Well, pistol optics are the clear winner, at least for me. Over the past 4 years or so, I have gradually made the switch to pistol-mounted optics for all my serious handguns. This wasn't exactly a comfortable switch, and it has only been, quote, final for about 2 years now. Since I've committed, though, there is no way I would go back. The advantages far outweigh the disadvantages. Today, I want to offer a few thoughts on why I think pistol optics make a lot of sense. The great irons versus optics debate. The optic debate feels like history repeating itself. When widespread optic adoption occurred on military rifles in Iraq and Afghanistan, we're talking early 2000s, minds were blown. The Marine Corps stuck with iron sights for rifle range qualification long after iron-sighted rifles were issued to, well, nearly anyone. People talked about the inherent fragility of optics relative to irons, and the gun community had a sky is falling moment for what seemed like 10 years. Then everybody realized the sky wasn't falling. Optics actually made shooting easier. They didn't break or fall off every time you sneezed, and we moved back to debating 9mm versus 45 or something of similar importance. And now we're repeating the debate with handguns. I understand some of the skepticism. I had the same skepticism 5 years ago, but I think at this point it's safe to say that pistol-mounted optics are here to stay. The technology has evolved. Optics are tough and reliable. They're widely used by military and police agencies and enthusiasts, competitors, serious self-defense people, instructors. They provide a lot of benefits if one is willing to work to master them. And yet, there's still a lot of guys out there who just don't like optics. Just yesterday, I heard a prolific YouTuber call optics, quote, tactical and a, quote, fad. If you don't like optics, you can find a YouTuber, blogger, podcaster, or instructor to back up your position. The thing I've noticed, though, is that no one who is recommending against optics has really mastered them. There are a lot of people cast doubt on optics with complaints like, I can't find the dot half the time, or it's not nearly as fast. This actually tells you very little about optics and a lot more about the person making this statement. They probably haven't gotten really good with optics, which is necessary to make a fair comparison. Now, let's get into why optics are a clear winner to me. The reason number one, optics are easier. I was an optic denier for a long time. I was really good with iron sights. I came up on iron sights. I thought everyone should force themselves to love iron sights as much as I did. When I finally put an optic on a gun, I didn't like it. The dot wasn't in the window half the time I presented, and it was just uncomfortable. I played around with a couple optics, then a couple of years later, I decided to get serious. I took a one-day optics transition class at my sheriff's office. This gave me a bit of a foundation, and about a month later, I attended a 5-day class with Tom Givens using a pistol-mounted optic. Instead of taking my favorite carry pistol, I took a P365 XL with an EPS carry mounted on top. Nothing like jumping off in the deep end. After that, I was sold on optics. I made leaps and bounds in that class, and I started putting them on all my handguns. Occasionally, when I go back to shooting iron-sighted guns, I realize just how difficult it is. You can't look at the target, the thing you probably most want to look at. Instead, you just have to focus on the front sight. Not only that, but you also have to focus a little bit on the rear sight. You have to line up 3 objects while your target is blurry in the background. There's just a lot going on with iron sights. Most of that stuff is second nature to those of us who grew up shooting iron sights. Coming back to an iron-sighted only gun after shooting optics for a while, though, it's jarring. Shooting with an optic is just so much easier and less mentally taxing. While shooting with irons is like shooting in hard mode. Reason number 2, optics provide a better visual field. The window of an optic offers a better window than iron sights. You actually get a look at a large portion of your target. The greater the distance, the more of a look at your target you get. When shooting with iron sights, the top of the slide is brought into the eye target line. This obscures the lower portion of the target. The closer you are to the target, the more this phenomenon occurs. If I'm in a fight, the situation will be fluid and evolving. This may be the one constant truth in life and death situations. I want to be able to see as much of the bad guy as possible. If I'm obscuring the lower portion of the body, I may fail to notice that the bad guy has dropped his gun or is taking some other action that should alter my actions. Optics provide much better ability to keep an eye on your adversary. You can just see a lot more through the optic window. Reason number 3, natural target focus. One of the most important reasons to switch, at least in my mind, is the brain's natural tendency to focus on the threat. When something is bearing down on us with the intent of doing serious bodily harm, our natural reaction is to give the threat our full attention. And this is a well-documented phenomenon. For maximum accuracy with iron sights, we have to consciously shift focus back to the sights. This goes against the brain's natural tendency. While I was carrying a gun with iron sights, I told myself that in a fight, I would be aware of this and have the presence of mind to ignore the immediate threat and focus on my sights. My experience in competition would indicate otherwise, however. Several months ago, I wrote an article about the hidden benefits of competition. You can go find that at swiftsilentdeadly.com. In it, I related a story that illustrates that sometimes, despite a tremendous amount of training and some actual experience, my nerves still get the best of me and I focus on the target predictably with poor results. Above all, I'm beginning to agree with Taylor at the Defenders and Disciples YouTube channel and podcast. Taylor says that in a rapidly evolving situation, it is dangerous to continue shooting at a person while focusing on the front sight. Think about that for a second. At any instant, your attacker could drop the weapon, turn around, or take another action to let you know that he is no longer a threat. At that point, you're not justified in shooting that person legally, nor are you morally justified, at least according to my personal set of values. Watching the target rather than switching focus from irons is the fastest way to check in with the bad guy and see what he's up to. Reason number 4, better accuracy. The aiming procedure with pistol optics is a little different. Rather than having to line up 3 objects that seem highly irrelevant to the threat at hand, the iron sights, the eyes can focus on the target. When the dot, be it red, green, blue, interrupts the eye target line, the gun is lined up to make the shot. Simple as that. The uncomplicated nature of an optic window, along with the much smaller dot, offers the potential for far superior accuracy. And if you're looking at the photos of this, I had the opportunity to zero 100 Aimpoint Koa equipped Glock 45s and Glock 19s over the course of several days for my agency. There is no way I could have consistently turned in 100 offhand groups that small with iron sights. Really impressed with that optic. Pistol optics probably don't provide a huge advantage at close range, but a high level of accuracy likely isn't needed at extreme close ranges anyway. They do provide massively better accuracy at longer ranges, say 15 yards and further. When shooting the Humbler drill, which is shot at 25 yards by the way, my front sight is almost as wide, or in some cases wider, than the 8 ring in a B8 target, which is a 5.5-inch circle. This means I have to align the front sight in the rear sight, and while doing so, bisect the circle vertically and make sure the edges of the front sight are equal with the edges of my acceptable target. That is a lot of stuff to keep track of. While shooting the same drill with a pistol optic, I simply place the dot in the middle of the circle, hold it there, and fire. My scores with the Humbler, also known as the 700 aggregate, have gone up on average about 25 points from about 630 to consistently over 650 with a pistol-mounted optic. That's a pretty solid score on a very difficult drill. One tip for shooting small targets more accurately at long range, by the way, is to turn the dot's intensity down. If you make the dot as small as possible, as long as it's still visible, it will be easier to more precisely place that within the target. Just remember to turn it back up to a well-visible level before you hit the street. Reason number 5, backup sights. An optic with co-witness irons gives you an instant redundancy. Most people will say that you need irons in case your optic fails. I contend that you also need an optic in case your irons fail. Yes, I've had irons fail. In the aforementioned Tom Gibbons class, my rear sight tried to walk its way out of the dovetail. I've also seen irons break and fall off guns. Not necessarily my guns, but I've been around shooting long enough to see it happen. In one instance, I was shooting a match with a close friend. He's actually my cousin. After shooting the second or third stage, he went to the safe area, unholstered his Glock 17, and confirmed that it now lacked a front sight. It just came off spontaneously during that stage of fire. It happens. 2 is 1, 1 is none, something like that. Anyway, like it or not, the optic does provide a completely separate, redundant sighting system, and that's never a bad thing when it comes to a fighting handgun. All right, reason number 6, deteriorating eyesight. Though I'm in phenomenal health for my age, I just ran a Spartan sprint yesterday. I'm training for a GoRuck event in September. I work out 6 days a week. I'm only able to delay, not completely opt out of the effects of aging. One of these effects is my eyesight. My eyes are still pretty good, but I've noticed an inability to do some things that I was able to do with a handgun just a couple of years ago. I always placed a lot of emphasis on pinpoint accuracy, especially at longer ranges. Unfortunately, in the past few years, I've noticed I just can't quite do what I used to be able to do with iron sights. The optic really restored my confidence in my own abilities. I can hit smaller targets at longer distances with greater accuracy now than I ever could with iron sights. Now, this is anecdotal to be sure, but again, I've yet to hear anyone who really mastered pistol optics just completely revert back to irons. Not only that, but optics will likely extend my shooting life. I plan to get much older than I am now. My eyesight at this moment is as good as it will be for the rest of my life. It's just all downhill from here. Optics will, in all likelihood, enable me to shoot with a high degree of accuracy for a long time to come. That's important to me, not just for defensive reasons, but for personal satisfaction as well. I like shooting and I want to be good at it as long as I possibly can. Now let's talk about the downsides of optics. And obviously I'm in favor of optics, so I don't put quite as much emphasis on these, but they are important to acknowledge. I'd be just lying or misleading you if I made out that there were no disadvantages to using pistol-mounted optics. First is expense. I didn't think this was a big one until I really went wholeheartedly all in with optics. And then I wanted one on all of my guns. Good optics are expensive, somewhere between $300 and $700, depending on what you're looking for. Having non-optic ready guns cut for optics, a thing that's mostly going away as more and more handguns are, ship optic ready, is expensive. Optics Planet or Palmetto State or somebody usually has a sale going, but they're still expensive. And this expense is exacerbated if you also have to buy a new holster to accommodate your optic-equipped pistol. Bulk and weight is another consideration. I don't think weight is a huge concern because even heavy optics only weigh a couple of ounces, but they are definitely bulkier. They'll be more difficult to conceal, all other things being equal. The smaller the optic is, the smaller the window will be, and obviously the larger the optic window, the harder the optic will be to conceal. An optic on a duty-sized pistol doesn't seem like a huge deal, but it can have a pretty dramatic effect on smaller pistols. Optic failure. I've yet to see an optic completely fail, but I have seen battery failures. I think backup irons and careful planning can mitigate this, however. I change my personal optic batteries out once a year, roughly 1/5 of their advertised lifespan. Likewise, our agency provides batteries for duty guns and changes them out at annual qualifications. Again, I've yet to see an optic fail, but like any man-made object, including iron sights, to be fair, they certainly can. Training. This is a false negative because all tools require training. You can throw a light on your gun, but you should train with it. Same with anything that you put on your gun or any equipment that you're using. Your iron sights required a tremendous amount of training to master. The downside for those old dogs already well trained with irons is the proverbial learning a new trick. Switching to a pistol-mounted optic isn't a huge mystery though. 10,000 repetitions will do it. However, some just don't want to make that time and effort investment. And in fairness, that is a personal decision. That is a downside to some. I don't see it as a big problem, but I can see how it's a downside to some. So to conclude here, optics are a clear winner over iron sights in the infamous irons versus optics debate, at least for me. Optics are easier to use. Just put the dot over the target. No multiple dots to line up or anything like that. Simple. Optics also provide a better visual field than irons. They don't obscure the lower half of the target. You can still see important things like the bad guy's hands. This benefit is enhanced exponentially by the fact that you can actually focus on the target. It's possible to watch the bad guy and see if he drops the gun, keeps shooting, produces another weapon, or turns to run. These things just might keep you out of prison. At distance, optics provide better accuracy than iron sights. They also provide an instantly available redundancy in the event iron sights fail. I'm using that one sort of tongue-in-cheek. Everybody mounts irons as a backup to their optic, but the point remains, both optics and irons can fail, and having a secondary sighting system on the gun is not a bad thing. If you're getting older, and who isn't, pistol-mounted optics can close a lot of that age-related vision gap. Optics come with some huge downsides though. Cost, bulk, weight, the risk of optic failure, and the need for increased training. Nothing is completely free of downsides, and these are a small price to pay with some huge benefits, at least for me. And 244, so I'm down 10. Down 13. That's in the 9 ring, 14, 15. So 85. Shot an 85 of that still, even with that guy.